Welcome back to the Real 411. I'm Dr. Chelsea McGee, and today we're stepping into a constitutional power that was once reserved for mercy but now feels like a political weapon: the presidential pardon. Forget the quiet clemency of past presidents. We're now watching pardons handed out like campaign favors to reality TV stars, sheriffs convicted of robbery, and political insiders with headline-making rap sheets. From Scott Jenkins to the Chrisleys, to convicted public officials who conveniently align with a certain narrative. This isn't just about second chances. It's about power plays and party loyalty. And here's the kicker. While ordinary Americans sit in prison for non-violent offenses without access to fair reviews, celebrities and cronies are getting personal invites to the White House. The Justice Department's review process sidestepped. The system of checks and balances bypassed. What we're witnessing is a radical transformation of clemency into a form of influence. And if we don't stop and ask what that means, we risk normalizing a justice system that only works for the well-connected. So today, we're pulling back the curtains on Trump's latest wave of controversial pardons, the political machinery behind them, and the chilling message it sends to anyone who still believes in equal justice under the law. Because as always, the story is never just a headline. Let's start with the case of Scott Jenkins, once the sheriff of Culpeper County, Virginia. The charges against him weren't just serious, they were cut and dry. Imagine this: over $75,000 in bribes exchanged for those all-important auxiliary deputy badges. Badges that granted law enforcement privileges. Jenkins wasn't actually subtle about it. FBI undercover agents captured it all. Envelopes of cash, audio recordings of Jenkins bragging how no other sheriff would dare follow his example. The jury's conviction came in a heartbeat. Just 2 hours of deliberation, and Jenkins was slapped with a verdict of guilty. And yet, just months into his 10-year sentence, he's pardoned by the President of the United States. Now let's talk about a different kind of celebrity, but with a similar tangled story. Todd and Julie Chrisley, reality TV royalty who portrayed themselves as Southern charm personified. But behind that gloss, a massive financial fraud operation. Prosecutors laid bare their scheme: $36 million in fake loans, unpaid taxes, and wire fraud. Todd got 12 years, Julie 7. You'd think those sentences might mean something, but instead, Savannah Chrisley, their daughter, goes to the White House, makes her case directly, and less than 48 hours later, they're free to return to their luxurious lives. The president even calls Savannah himself to break the news. These moves aren't just about clemency, they're performances. What's truly fascinating and perhaps alarming is the stagecraft of it all. Trump's focus on political spectacle diverges from the traditional low-profile bureaucratic review process. Foregoing discretion, he's making clemency announcements as a loud display of celebration. These pardons aren't whispers, they're headlines. And that invites a question. What does it mean when clemency is shaped by proximity to power rather than standards of justice? Let's pause and listen to 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞, former Department of Justice attorney, discuss Trump's pardons.
Conspiracy to defraud banks out of more than $30 million. Todd Chrisley could be released from prison in Florida at any moment. And this week, the president also pardoned a former Virginia sheriff sentenced to 10 years in federal prison as part of a $75,000 bribes for badges scheme. Former Justice Department pardon attorney 𝐿iz joins us now live. She also has a Substack at 𝐿awyeroyer.com. I love that name. It's very creative. What do you make of all these pardons, Liz?
Well, Boris, honestly, I don't usually use a lot of hyperbole, but I will say that President Trump and his pardon attorney, Ed Martin, are making a complete mockery out of the pardon power. This is a solemn presidential power that is intended to benefit people who have truly earned second chances through clemency by demonstrating good conduct, remorse for their offense of conviction, and rehabilitation. There are many deserving Americans who are waiting for pardons, and those folks are all being over overlooked and bypassed in favor of friends, political loyalists, and allies of the president, which really makes a mockery of our system of justice as well as the pardon power with which the president is entrusted.
Now, I understand that you were fired after you refused to recommend that gun rights of actor Mel Gibson be restored. Gibson, of course, is a supporter of President Trump's. Do you think that showing your support for the president, whether, vocally coming out and speaking at political conventions or attending fundraisers and that sort of thing, is now a prerequisite for folks to get a pardon?
Well, this, Boris, is a White House where everything that is not bolted down is for sale. And that includes pardons. That includes benefits that are construed by the Department of Justice. Things like restoration of gun rights are being doled out to folks who are friends and loyalists of the president, allies who have demonstrated political loyalty or made financial contributions to the president. Everything appears to be for sale, and that is effectively demolishing the rules that have always governed our nation.
The administration is pushing back on that reasoning, and many point to President Biden pardoning not only his son Hunter, his brother as well, and issuing preemptive pardons for a number of prominent Trump critics. What do you make of that comparison?
There are some legitimate criticisms of the way that President Biden used his pardon power, but what is happening now is taking it to another whole level. One thing that is different between what President Trump is doing and what President Biden did is that he is using the pardon power to erase millions and frankly, it totals over $1 billion of debts that are owed by these wealthy individuals who are getting pardons. He's using pardons to wipe out restitution judgments, which is money that is owed to victims of crime. People like the victims of the Chrisleys who were defrauded are now not going to be paid back because the pardon wipes out the debt. And I've looked at these closely and added it all up, and the president has effectively erased over $1 billion in debts that are owed mostly to victims of crimes by doling out pardons to friends and supporters.
The pardon power comes with being the president, being in the executive branch. I wonder if you see any recourse, perhaps through Congress, to limit pardon power, because there has been historically bipartisan calls for some kind of reform.
It's a very tricky issue because the Constitution does grant this broad plenary power to the president, and it seems like where we are now is that we need to be having a constitutional conversation, a conversation about whether the Constitution should be amended to rein in this unfettered power in some way. The pardon power relies on the person who is entrusted with it exercising it in good faith and with good intentions, and that is not what we're seeing here.
Liz Hoyer, fascinating to get your perspective. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Still to come, we have...
The answer, I think, begins with the sheer normalization of it all. This chapter of clemency shifts another boundary, making room for financial fraud, public corruption, and partisan loyalty to bypass consequences. The Jenkins and Chrisleys pardons set a tone, but they're hardly the only examples. Stick with me, because next we'll unpack the wider network of pardons that centers not on reform, but reward. Now, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture, because Scott Jenkins and the Chrisleys, outrageous as their cases may seem, are just two names in a growing roster of controversial pardons issued by this administration. It's a pattern that tells a larger story, and it's one we can't afford to ignore. Take Rod Blagojevich, the former governor of Illinois, convicted of trying to sell a Senate seat, Barack Obama's no less. He served 8 of his 14 years before Trump first commuted his sentence, then issued him a pardon during this second term. Or James Callahan, a once powerful union leader convicted of pocketing hundreds of thousands of dollars in unreported gifts, who received his pardon just before his sentencing. These aren't isolated incidents. They paint a troubling picture of clemency as a tool of political favor rather than justice. And there's something even more sinister at work here. Critics have pointed out that as these high-profile pardons are handed out like tokens to allies, the Justice Department's Public Integrity Section, traditionally tasked with holding public officials accountable, is shrinking in both size and scope. Even the FBI reportedly shut down a unit meant to investigate federal corruption. That should sound alarm bells, because it's not just about any one pardon. It's about reshaping the entire landscape of accountability for public officials. And the message is clear. Loyalty and connections matter more than the rule of law. I want to pause here and share something a bit personal. As a physician, I've seen patients accused of things they didn't do, wrongful accusations that led to a justice system weighted against them. I've written letters, pulled together evidence, and advocated for their release. And let me tell you, that fight takes time, patience, and persistence. Now compare that to what we're seeing with these high-profile cases. Instead of rigorous defense and rehabilitation, we see pardons orchestrated overnight through a phone call, not because of wrongful evidence, but because of political affiliation. It's a two-tiered system, and it's a slap in the face to those tirelessly fighting for real justice. But it doesn't end there. The very machinery behind the clemency process is changing too. Next up, we'll talk about how traditional review processes have been discarded in favor of a small circle of political allies. Figures like Ed Martin, Trump's pardon attorney, have reshaped what clemency looks like in America. And that shift, well, it's raising even more questions about the integrity of our justice system. Stay tuned. Let's take a closer look at the process here, or perhaps the lack thereof. Traditionally, presidential pardons go through a rigorous review by the Justice Department's Office of the Pardon Attorney. The process was intended to protect the integrity of clemency decisions, ensuring they serve justice, not personal or political agendas. But today, that safeguard is little more than a relic. Look no further than Ed Martin, Trump's hand-picked pardon attorney. Not a career official, not an impartial magistrate, but a staunch political ally and architect of what he calls no MAGA left behind strategy. His words, not mine. Trump's loyalists and his swift action to push pardons like those for Scott Jenkins and January 6 rioters, they are as much about making headlines as they are about cementing loyalty. And this shift isn't just worrisome, it's deliberate. Consider this. Thousands of January 6 defendants, including some convicted of violence against police officers, received clemency in a single sweeping act. Public celebrations followed, with the president himself calling it an effort to correct what he labeled a grave national injustice. But what's truly at play here? These mass pardons are not about evaluating individual merit or circumstances. They are about sending a political message. Align yourself with the right administration, and suddenly, even criminal behavior comes with a golden ticket out of accountability. It's not just the mass pardons either. Look at how certain controversial pardons have been publicly celebrated, almost as though they're political trophies. High-profile cases like Jenkins and the Chrisleys were celebrated on social media, complete with congratulatory videos and personal calls. It's a spectacle designed to inspire loyalty and followers while eroding public trust in the justice system. And that erosion of trust is not an abstract concern, it's tangible. When clemency becomes a perk for the connected rather than a chance for rehabilitation, what message does that send to everyday Americans? When the system openly favors loyalty over impartiality, it chips away at the promise of equal justice under the law. And that's not just sad, it's dangerous. So let me ask you this. Should pardons correct perceived political bias, or should they uphold impartial standards? Should the power to erase someone's crime hinge on campaign cash, celebrity, and allegiance, or on fairness and accountability? These are questions we need to ask, and answers we have to demand. So here's the bottom line. Presidential pardons were designed as tools of compassion, not currency for loyalty. But what we've seen in this latest wave is a distortion of that power, a system where celebrity clout, campaign cash, and political allegiance weighs more than fairness, facts, or accountability. And this isn't a hypothetical threat we're talking about. It's a reality that's chipping away at the foundation of equal justice under the law. These aren't just isolated incidents. They're part of a growing trend where public trust is sidelined, legal norms are upended, and justice is treated like a reality show twist. And if this is the new standard, then what happens to the rest of us? What happens to the people without cameras, donors, or connections? The ones whose chances hinge on merit, not social media followers or White House phone calls. Now's the time to act. Share this episode with your friends and families. Ask your lawmakers where they stand on pardon reform and demand transparency. This isn't just about politics. It's about who we are as a nation and what we stand for. Because if we want a justice system that serves the public, not the privileged, we have to fight for it. Silence isn't an option anymore. It never was. I'm Dr. 𝐃𝐨𝐧'𝐭 McGee. As always, stay informed, stay relentless, and remember, the story is never just a headline. Take care, and I'll see you next time.